Welcome to another segment of Politics Done Right. Today I have a special guest for you. I met this special person on a it's not a live chat, it's a conference that we had with several mayors, with Dennis Kucinich, Representative Dennis Kucinich, and quite a few others. I was so impressed with him leading the conference. I had to find out who, I know about him because, everybody who knows about Medicare for All, this is a guy you got to know. So when I saw him on the call first, I was a bit shocked, right? But thereafter, it was like, wow, he doesn't look like just that kind of a guy that stands behind the paper as a lawyer and write these policies up. This guy can talk. So I said, man, I need to find this guy. And Joel Segal, thank you so much for accepting this invite to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm healthy and breathing, and I feel like I have a hermano. I got a new brother with Egberto. I'm just honored that our universe has brought us together. You're a wonderful person. I think you're one of the best talk show hosts I've ever seen or heard. I've been on these shows for 30 years, and you're one of the best I've seen.
Well, I mean, how much did I pay you for that again? Look,
Nothing,
I appreciate,
nada.
brother. I appreciate that. But let me just. I'm going to let you talk. I want you to do most of the talking. But before you do most of the talking, I just want to tell the audience who this guy is. Anybody who remembers Representative John Conyers in Congress, anybody remember that he was the author of H.R. 676. When you talk about a bill, you're talking about having to write the particular policies and how it interacts with the different parts of your medical system and society, etc. Well, the person who wrote the bill, the person who put all those little digits together, etc., was El Señor Joel Segal. So, Joel, first of all, I want to tell you, I followed 676 for years. I've been preaching 676 for years.
Thank you.
And that was a good piece of work that you had there. And everything that Medicare for All is built on right now has incorporated those tenets that you put into that policy. So thank you for what you brought, my brother.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was lucky. I got to work with a genius named Congressman John Conyers, who was a protege of Martin Luther King. And he hired me and he said, I want you to write a single payer bill. And I said, okay. And but I got to work with the Physicians for a National Health Program,
Great
and I
group.
had been, oh yeah, and I had been their representative in Congress as a lobbyist. So I called on them and I said, look, this is our chance to come up with the best gold standard bill that would reflect the best practices of physicians. But I came at it as a patient who grew up uninsured and had so many problems with the healthcare system. I owe about 150,000 medical bills. So it was drafted in the spirit of the uninsured patient, and then what would a physician want? And I wanted a Medicare, system. How would a Medicare deliver a universal healthcare program? And the two former editors of the New England Journal of Medicine, they helped me too with the final draft, and Harvard Medical School doctors and award-winning economists, and it was really a team effort.
Well, I mean, team effort is one thing, but I mean, you really drove that thing through. What do you think is going to be the faith now? We have Jayapal and Bernie that's trying their level best to continue the mission, continue on the path to get this stuff moved forward. How do you think we're going to get it, especially since the chosen one for the Democratic Party and the one that likely will get elected is Joe Biden, who says Medicare for All is a giveaway?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, I didn't think that Medicare for All was going to see the light of day. I used to joke with my older brother, Larry. I'd say, well, about when I'm 90 years old, maybe they'll take it seriously. But I was stunned that after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, and I was one of the lead staffers to help shepherd that bill to passage with several other staffers and members of Congress and grassroots organizations. I was amazed at that Bernie ran on it and Dennis Kucinich ran on it, and I think that the reason why it stood the test of time is A, it's the truth. B, it's so simple to understand, right? A publicly financed privately delivered healthcare system like Medicare. But Connors and I traveled together for 13 years, almost every weekend, to all 50 states, a few hundred cities, and we built political power in all those states and all those cities because I knew if I left the Hill that this movement would have to live far beyond me. And so we founded a lot of different organizations who ended up raising money. And I'm just so like amazed at how the grassroots have done their job. Progressive Democrats of America, the National Nurses Association. Uh,
You actually was a part founder of the Progressive Democrats of America, right?
I was the co-founder, and with Tim Carpenter and several former staffers from the Kucinich campaign. I was their first vice chair.
Right.
Mimi Kennedy was their first chair. I helped raise their money, build their board, kind of come up with this idea called inside outside of strategy, and I knew that they would carry the tradition on. A guy named Dr. Bill, they call him, is the one who's been really pushing it so hard for Progressive Democrats of America. But Bernie took it to another level. Elizabeth Warren took it to another level, and now we have to take it to an even higher level if we're going to have an impact both on Biden and the Congress. And I have certain ideas about what we have to do to get it past the finish line. And
Before you
but
give those
yeah.
ideas, though, before you give those ideas, I want, because I think to move forward, you have to know the mistakes that you've made. And you were very responsible, part responsible when to shepherd the Affordable Care Act through Congress.
Mhm.
Right now, because the Democrats have been able to sort of put the blame of the deficiencies of our healthcare system on things Republicans didn't want to do. But I want it to be made clear from the author of 8676 and someone who also shepherded the Obamacare. I want Americans to know, and specifically Democrats, that some of the enemies of progress was themselves Democrats, because otherwise the Obamacare product would have been a much better bill. Why don't you explain some of that?
Yeah, I want to be perfectly candid about what happened. When Senator Baucus took 676 off the table during the Obamacare deliberations, I immediately had a meeting with about 70 leaders from around the country who flew into D.C. to meet in John Conyers' Judiciary Committee room. And I was like, let's see if we can do a Medicare public option. We were ready to go. Um, we were ready to get organized. Two members of the Progressive Caucus, their staffers, just didn't feel like the public option was going to be a priority, and they did not move the public option that far. And then Senator Lieberman, who I fondly call him the senator from Etna,
Right.
he said, I'm taking the public option off the table, the so-called public option, and I was pretty close to him, and I didn't understand why would he do that, because without a public option, there's no competition with the insurance companies, right, to lower their rates and provide better coverage, et cetera.
Right. The public
Um,
option presents the baseline.
yeah, I mean, now half the bill of Obamacare is Medicaid. Now, a lot of people don't know that, but Medicaid is a single-payer program.
Right.
It covers 100% of your bill, and the Medicare plus 10 reimbursement rate was in the first bill, so that it would be a healthy reimbursement rate, so doctors wouldn't say we're not going to take you because you're on Medicaid. And I remember when Congressman Waxman was talking to a bunch of us at a conference about healthcare. He said, "Now, for those of you who are for single payer, we have a Medicaid." And I remember saying to myself, "Wow, this is really cool." I didn't think he was going to do that, and that was because of the single payer HR 67 movement. In terms of the mistakes made, I would say lessons learned would be, if you're going to ever consider passing Medicare for all single payer, there's going to have to be a much larger movement. There's not a single payer full-time office in DC. There's not a single payer PAC. There's not full-time organizers who are really being paid to do this. And until that happens, it's going to be a long, long way to get there. But I'm convinced we can get there because our healthcare system is falling apart in front of our very eyes. 30 million people about to be uninsured because of COVID-19.
No, I'm glad that you said that because when we talk about we are going to have to mobilize. I've been telling my audience for quite a while now that we have to really be optimal in the way we use the next 2 to 3 months because everybody is going to be in there challenging because everybody knows that we're going into some sort of depression. And how we get out of it, how we are designed out of it, is whoever has the ears of those politicians who are going to pass the policies that get us out. Now, normally, as happened in 2008, the policies were corporate centric. We got the pittances. Likewise, again, if we're not careful, the same thing will occur again. My expectation with having people like you in the fold, that we are actually going to do exactly what you just said, and that is mobilization has got to begin. You're talking about having an office in Washington, D.C. Yeah, you may have an office in Washington, D.C., but in my humble opinion, we also have to be virtualized around the country for a new education process. Let me ask you a question this way,
Absolutely.
and
That's
this is
right.
simple, right? I've always wondered why basic math never applies to healthcare if it wasn't just a political issue. In other words, when did having additional expenses reduce the cost of something when single payer removes a large percentage of those expenses, not only on the side of not only on the side of the corporations or the people, but on the side of the doctors?
Well, first of all, what single payer does, and you can see this in Europe, and I'd say the best example is Taiwan.
Hmm.
Taiwan literally has 676. I mean,
Right.
the same doctors who helped me draft 676 are the same doctors who helped draft the Taiwan plan. And what single payer does is it keeps the cost curve of medical care flat. Right now, it goes up exponentially every year because it's basically a for-profit, right, corporation, both the insurance companies, hospitals, long-term care centers. It's often stockholder driven and owned. So there's no way for there to be cost controls. And until you have a Medicare for all single payer system, the costs are going to go up trillions of dollars. Whenever critics say, "Oh, single payer is going to cost 30 to 40 trillion dollars," I'm like, "Nope, the current system is going to cost 30 to 40 trillion dollars because there's no global budgeting of the hospitals. There's no way that the government can negotiate down prescription drugs." I'll give you an example of Egberto of insane healthcare cost. Um, a MRI machine cost $1 million to buy and 600,000 to install. Now, $2 million, $2 million, that's the cost of one of Donald Trump's yachts.
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense. And but what really really hurts is the people who were still shut out of the healthcare system because they didn't expand Medicaid in my state in 14 states. About 1,700 people died last year because of that. And so when you need a federal system because these Republican governors are going to always push back and say, we don't want that federal program and it's going to cost too much. None of that is true. All that being said, why not replicate what works in every other country and get everybody covered and save hundreds of billions of dollars a year? And a universal system, you show your card to any doctor you want, any hospital you want, any provider you want. You scan your card, it shows your medical background. You leave with no copays, no deductibles, no cost sharing, no bills, no bill collectors calling you every second like they do me, no bills in the mail. We don't need that system. That's the old system. We need a new system.
Absolutely. So, well, I mean, I think that is something that we ought to work for. I think that is a passion of many of us. Like I said, from Occupy Wall Street, where we had the real genesis of starting of this type of program in here, to now, I think it is time. I think more than ever, Americans are going to see that employer-based insurance makes absolutely no sense because as the 30 million have lost their jobs, the 15 million or so of those that were lucky enough to have insurance will join the family of the uninsured. And I think that is going to make a big difference. Well, look, we've discussed Medicare for all, which is, I think, something most people are interested. But I want to take you a little bit beyond that because Medicare for all is just one segment of our economy. I think what we need is a complete economic restructure where we are human centric as opposed to corporate centric. I've always told people many times when you ask, whenever we put out policy, you're a policy wonk that can speak. I love that. A policy wonk that can speak and appeal to people and people can understand them. That's great. Let me
And
tell
play
you.
the bass guitar.
Go ahead. And play. Oh, let me tell you guys. This guy sent me a cut on this is funkadelic, man.
That's right. I played with one of the Parliament Funkadelics on that record you had. I
I
played with
know
another
that's
guitar
what
player.
that's what I said. Yeah,
Hmm.
so but I mean a hell of a bass player, guys. A hell of a bass
Thank you.
player. Now, but we have to start having a paradigm shift in the way we think. Whenever you write a policy, right? Whenever Joel Segal write a policy, the first thing the business guys ask or many politicians ask is, how is that going to affect business? In Spanish we say eso está trastornado, which means that's like reverse crazy. Every policy that you pass, the very first thing you should ask is how does it affect humanity? How does it affect the citizens of this country?
Exactly.
Right? And after you ask that, you say, how do we fit the corporation into that modal? My question to you, brother Segal, is how best do we educate Americans to stop thinking how the Powell Manifesto told them to think, to ask about business first and not ask about you, Joel, you, Peter, you, Paul, you, Anna, first.
I love this interview, man. You're really asking questions that are so salient and rarely asked, So thank you for this question. Um, First of all, everyone should read The Economist Paul Krugman,
I
and he
love
wrote
him.
a book. Oh, he's the best. New York Times economist, but he wrote a book called "End This Depression Now." The premise of the book is that America can literally borrow in an unlimited fashion to a point, and then we have to pay for things. But when our gross domestic product is $16 trillion, so it's up there with China. And when you're the richest country in the world, it's a mythology. He calls it intellectual confusion. You can't be the poorest country. No, you can't be the wealthiest country in the world and then be the poorest country in the world at the same time. That makes no sense. So if we're going to spend $780 billion on the military and when we're not in a Cold War, and then give trillions of dollars of tax cuts to the super rich, well, what would happen if we didn't have those tax cuts on the super rich who don't need them, and we didn't have all that money spent on the military, and we did, you know, modest, progressive taxes on the very wealthy? We would have the Rolls Royce or Bentley of healthcare. So what you have to do when someone says, "Well, we can't afford it," you have to literally show them the numbers. We costed out 676 when we first introduced it, and we showed here's how much it's going to cost, here's how much a family's going to pay, here's how much the business is going to pay, and the individual, so we could answer that question. And then lastly, you really have to be able to show the American people, look, this is how much this is going to cost. We knew Obamacare was $780 billion. They showed how to pay for it. This is a mistake that my brother Bernie Sanders has made. He has to go to Lewin and Associates or the Urban Institute or these other think tanks and really cost it out and show the savings and the expenditure. If we don't do that, then the right wing and the corporate Democrats will say we can't afford it, which is very easy to say that because then you don't have to do any other further research. The problem is the media, and I'm glad that you're a progressive media, but basically the corporate media structure, instead of asking economists who know about single payer and bringing them on their shows, they go right along with that narrative because it sells and it gets corporate sponsors. Often the insurance companies and the drug companies, I mean, I think MSNBC is fantastic and CNN, but look at their commercials. who who who's sponsoring these media moguls? It's the corporate 1%. So we need alternative media like you, Egberto. I hope that the idea that you've promulgated, which is to have a kind of a progressive media that's internet, radio, articles, blogs, that's what we need to do so we don't have to depend on MSNBC and CNN. I think you're a genius, and I'm going to do everything I can to support your vision.
I
Otherwise,
appreciate.
we can't get our message out. How do we get our message out?
I mean that is everything. I talk to people. I live in red district in Texas here, and all my friends in Starbucks are conservatives. And the thing about it is, we were able to have a conversation. And the thing about it is, they are convincible. I remember the book that was written. I don't remember the name. What's happened to those folks in Kansas or that kind of a stuff, right? I don't. You know which book I'm
I
talking
remember
about?
that book. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I understand what the book is saying, but there's a piece of the book that I think where I want to go. I think when you give people a certain level of respect, they start to listen. And many a times, what we've done, I'm not talking about you, Joel, or others, because you're plain spoken in the way you get things across. And like I said, you communicate. But there are too
Thank you.
many of us that when we are doing that communication, we're doing it from a level, first of all, looking at a person and saying, "You are stupid, now listen." And what I try to do is I try to listen first to see how they've gotten there. And after I've seen, and it takes more time, granted. But hell, we fail so many times. If we had taken some time, maybe, I'm talking to a sect of us now, not all of us, taking some time, maybe we would have gotten that delta taken care of so that we could get that little bit more that we needed to get many of the policies that we want come across. Because look at progressive policies. I went to Netroots 2015, and Elizabeth Warren was there. Elizabeth Warren gave a speech that brought the House down. Elizabeth Warren went to the stats and pointed out that if you were to forget about Democrats and Republicans and spoke to all Americans and asked them what they wanted, the policies that you write, Joel, the policies that you write are the policies Americans want.
Yes, I mean, I write from the experience of someone who was, I grew up in an upper middle class family. My father died when I was 14. I had to go to work at 15. I experienced homelessness. I experienced being kicked out of hospitals. I experienced not having food and going to the social services and getting food stamps because I have a health challenge called sleep apnea, and I had several surgeries because I couldn't breathe at night, and it was life threatening. So I write bills and I speak from the perspective of someone who has suffered a lot, but I was also very fortunate because there were many years where I did not suffer. So I can actually be very thankful about that. And when I launched the universal healthcare movement, was with Bernie Sanders and Barney Frank and about 1,000 people, mainly of color. I organized uninsured people for 2 years on the internet. That's how I got into Congress. And I think the key to talking to people is with respect and what John Conyers called love and logic. I'm from North Carolina. I grew up in the South. My friends were also very conservative. And I had to learn to speak the language of a shoe salesman. My father was a shoe salesman. I grew up with all these shoe salesmen. And I've learned that you can't talk over people. You got to answer their questions. You got to listen. Like as a bass player, I got to listen to other musicians in order to play that groove with the drummer. You got to give people respect and answer their questions. And as Bootsy Collins says, one of my favorite bass players, you can't fake the funk or your nose will grow. He called it the Pinocchio theory. You can't fake being sincere. You can't fake knowing the policy or your nose will grow. People, you look like a liar. But people, if they want to advocate for single payer, you've got to be able to explain single payer and know the policy. A lot of people still have never read the bill HR 676.
I know.
I wrote it. It's only 26 pages. I would tell people, read the bill. I wrote it so a 12th grader could understand it. I wrote it that way on purpose. I told the drafters on the Hill, I want you to write it so it's simple so anyone can understand it. And when Conyers first saw the bill, he he got a little upset and he goes, why is this bill so thin. I said, because the Canadian healthcare system, about 16 pages. But if you're not happy with it, I will talk to the former editors of the New England Journal of Medicine and Harvard Medical School. He said, oh, okay. I'm okay with it then. Well, it turned out I was right. Shorter the better. Healthcare is not that hard.
No,
It's not hard. You've got to go to a doctor or a hospital or get your drugs or get your medical equipment. They got to get paid. How hard is that? Just have the government pay for it and then get rid of the middleman, the insurance companies.
that is so smart of that statement is what people don't get. The reason we put complexity into healthcare is so that we could have skimmers, so that we could have people who profit undeservedly from the system. If it's simple, there's no real way to profit. But you know what? We don't mind profit. We don't mind these private corporations doing their thing. The thing about it is there are certain parts of society that belongs in the commons. There are certain parts of society that shouldn't be for profit, because profit means, Joel, your humanity depends on whether my shareholder is going to get that profit or not. And you know what? The fiduciary responsibility of the corporate executive is to the shareholder, not to the worker, not to the patient. That's their fiduciary responsibility. You're a lawyer, you know that.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, Mr. Conyers used to say, the reason why the current system doesn't work, Joel, for healthcare? I'd say, why? Because it's run like a business, and you can't run healthcare like a business. It's got to be a public commodity. And, the biggest mythology that we're dealing with now is coming from Joe Biden.
Yes.
And Biden will say, to distinguish himself from Bernie Sanders, people love their private insurance. And if we do Medicare for all, I'll veto it. Well, no, sorry. People like their doctor. They don't like their private health insurance. I mean, maybe 0.1% like their private health insurance. And usually these are people with trust funds, gold-plated, plans from the AFL-CIO or the bank. Majority of people cannot stand their health insurance. And I really think there needs to be a poll taken by, AP, UPI poll, where they ask people who are uninsured with health issues like me, do you like your health insurance? They're going to say no. We never hear, I pitched a movie called Sicko to Michael Moore years ago.
And he made it.
In order to, well, boy, did he make it. It's one thing to pitch an idea. It's another thing for it to be a Picasso, but he just did a phenomenal job. And we were losing badly in Congress on Obamacare and single payer. I wanted members of Congress who were basically white and rich, and the staff who were white and rich, to understand the plight of the uninsured. And I knew they didn't understand. And I knew if there was a movie with people in the movie talking about what it's like to be uninsured, we could turn that around. And sure enough, Michael Moore did this phenomenal movie. I was with him the last day of shooting. He's a great guy. And when that movie came out, we showed it on the Hill. We showed it in D.C. And I remember a Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of Defense, looked at me and he goes, I did not know how bad it was. And a friend of mine who works for NBC now, a senior producer, said, Joel, I didn't know how bad it was. And I was like, yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure we did this movie. We need to do an updated movie of Sicko 2, interview people who have private health insurance, interview people who've gotten insurance from Obamacare, interview people who did not get Medicaid, show the system as it is now, which is morally corrupt, morally bankrupt, costly, people still getting turned down even from hospitals. There was a 17-year-old kid who was uninsured, got turned down from a hospital because he was uninsured, and he died in his car of COVID-19.
Yes.
The average bill, Egberto, for a COVID-19 patient is $30,000. Are you going to have a bake sale to pay for that? Or, GoFundMe?
No.
Hell no.
And not only that, we are going to, COVID-19 will be saturating GoFundMe. And the funny thing about it is it's saturating GoFundMe to make a bunch of rich, fat cats a bit richer. No, I'm glad that you mentioned that about telling the stories because in our little way here, what I've been doing is probably every couple of weeks or so, we get somebody who comes and tell their story. And it's amazing. I had a woman, her name is Rose Williams, who came and told her story about having breast cancer. And that doctor, because of the insurance company having a strict schedule as to when to do an MRI, in as much as she had a lump, he made her wait, and until it really just got grossed and started to grow out and break the skin,
Oh my God.
didn't
Okay.
she get coverage? She survived, but it was all driven by the insurance company that people are supposed to love. Look, Joel, we are coming to the end of this interview. Please tell me something that I haven't asked, something that you want to tell the audience at large. It's yours.
We need a unified progressive movement that'll create a human centric America. We need a rebirth and a reset where corporations are not king, rich people don't rule us, but govern us. And we, the people, have to take matters in our own hands peacefully, have universal health care, jobs for all, housing for all, 100% clean, renewable energy. We got to get rid of poverty. We don't need a prison industrial complex. We don't need homeless people. Let's envision a new America, and let's find people like you, Egberto, to be leaders of that movement, because we could do this. It's a democracy. And I'll close by saying people often point the finger at the 1%. I would say examine the 99%. And why hasn't the 99% been able to do something about the 1%'s moral corruption? We need a new America and a new world. And I look forward to building that with you and all your people who are listening to your show. And I'm honored to be on your show. You're a phenomenal talk show host. I can't wait to see you go nationally.
Thank you so kindly for the kind words. Joel Segal. Joel Segal. I always say it wrong.
It's all
Executive
good.
Executive
It's
Director
all good.
of Justice Action Mobilization Network, and a hell of a bass player who can actually do Funkadelic like Funkadelic does it. Thank you so
Look,
kindly for the interview.
keep the funk alive.
There you go. I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.